Hello and welcome to the first episode of the Feather on Football podcast. I'm Luke Feather and today I'm joined by Anthony Stonelake. How are you doing?
Yeah, not too bad, man.
Right, so for the first episode of the podcast, I thought we'd talk about probably the biggest story in English football at the minute. Liverpool, of course, have won the league for the first time in 30 years. First Premier League title. Anthony, as a Liverpool fan, what does that mean to you?
It's quite surreal for me. Obviously, first time in my lifetime, first time in a lot of people's lifetime.
Yeah,
It's just magnificent. It's only recently sunk in the last couple of days. I've been able to just sit there and go, yeah, Liverpool are champions of England for the first time in so long.
of
And
course, we've known for probably a long time now that it was coming because obviously you've absolutely stormed it. You've run away with it this
yeah,
year. But for it to actually be over the line, I suppose it's just a relief more than anything, especially with the lockdown happening and the fear of like null and void.
from the way that we reacted, you could have sworn we won it on the last day.
Yeah,
Because it didn't matter how it happened. The reaction was always going to be like that.
yeah. So looking into the future for Liverpool, this summer transfer window, we know there might not be as much money to spend for some of the clubs because of the financial impact of coronavirus. But what do you think Liverpool have to do in order to progress? And because obviously this year in the Champions League, not as you would have hoped, and maybe in the FA Cup as well. So how do you think Liverpool can progress or stay where they are?
This is a very, very difficult question to answer because if you go ahead and you add two or three players worth 60 million into the team, it's just going to change the whole dynamic and it'll unsettle too much of what makes this team so ruthlessly incredible when it comes to especially league football.
Yeah.
It's a very delicate balance that Liverpool need to find this summer. But I do definitely feel like something needs to be added to the team because players will inevitably be walking out the door as well.
Yeah. I do find it interesting with Liverpool as well because in the last few years, you've seen teams like Man United, Chelsea to a certain extent, Man City, have gone out there and bought superstars. With Liverpool, you haven't really done that. I mean, I know you spent a lot of money on Van Dijk, but at the time he wasn't a superstar, as you might say. You've sort of made your own stars. So if you now you've won the league and you go out there and buy an £80 million player, whoever, what would that do for the squad? Do you think?
This is why I really couldn't see it happening. I
Yeah,
couldn't see us buying a Kai Havertz or a Jadon Sancho because it just doesn't fit the philosophy of the club. I can see us going out and buying someone like Milo Rashica from Bremen or even a Tyrone Mings, someone like that, to who's going to add some depth and some quality depth to the side without breaking the entire philosophy.
I think that's what's needed more than anything for Liverpool. It's just the depth. I know it's been said for a couple of years, or if Van Dijk gets injured, what happens? But he hasn't been injured, so it's one of them where I don't think you need someone that can step up and do the same job. You just need more depth, really, if you know what I mean. It's just about fear of when one or two big stars get injured, what will happen. So it's just more about adding to the squad.
Yeah, 100% is. Like, I was having this discussion with a few people the other day about what an ideal transfer window this summer would look like. And I didn't name one superstar to be brought in. If you take into account the outgoings you expect to see, that's what Dejan Lovren, Xherdan Shaqiri, Adam Lallana, Nathaniel Klein's gone as well. But I fully believe Neco Williams is more than good enough to play back up to Trent.
Yeah,
Incomings, I'd probably go for Jamal Lewis from Norwich, Tyrone Mings. We've got good history with bringing in relegated players and them turning out to be quality.
of course.
I feel like the closest I get to bringing in a superstar would probably be looking at someone like Ruben Neves from Wolves.
That's an interesting one because Neves, I've always seen him as one of those players. I remember when he was just coming through at Porto and he looked like one of those players that every big club in Europe was going to be looking at because I think he was their captain at like 18 or 19. And then when Wolves, the Portuguese takeover happened at Wolves, And so it seemed like every young Portuguese player in Europe went to Wolves, and he went there. I always thought it was a bit of a weird one, but he's proven his worth in the Premier League. And maybe thinking more towards the future, players like Jordan Henderson, he's turned 30 this year. So maybe he could be a long-term replacement.
Yeah, absolutely. And Neves is still only young, and I feel like people forget this because obviously he's been on the scene since such a young age that he has retained his youth whilst also gaining so much experience.
There is one player whose name Liverpool fans will be very familiar with, who is reportedly available this summer, Philip Coutinho. Now, of course, you signed him from Inter Milan for £8 million, sold him for a massive profit, something about 150 million, something in that region. What are your thoughts on him possibly returning? Would you want him back? And would he even make the starting 11?
I do not want him back in the side. I think the way Coutinho plays, it's always sort of, he benefits from having a team around him rather than being part of something bigger.
Right.
I feel like we saw that a lot in his last season or half season with Liverpool, whereas it was sort of like the Coutinho show and everybody else was sort of incidental in what happened around him. And that's how he ended up scoring all of those like wild long shot goals, because it always ended up being filtered down to his responsibility rather than having Mane, Salah and Firmino, who now control the attack. It would be those players trying to complement Coutinho.
I also think with the actual balance of the squad, I don't think Coutinho would fit in, because obviously you have got that front three who, yeah, they all work very hard, but when you throw Coutinho in there as well, you can't drop any of his front three. And your midfield three is so important for you, because Fabinho has been brilliant. Henderson has been talked about as player of the season. And then you've got a player like Wijnaldum or Keita who's always going to work for you. And if you take one of those out and put Coutinho in, the balance just is all off for me there.
Oh yeah, I 100% agree with that. Especially because it's it's a delicate balance, this Liverpool side.
Yeah.
And if you take someone like Wijnaldum out, who gives you such a dynamic, all-rounded midfield performance every single week, you just lose so much of what he gives you by adding not enough more with Coutinho.
Yeah, agreed. So moving on to other clubs. So obviously you've absolutely stormed away with the title this season. Next season, I think we're going to be looking at Man City, looking to bridge the gap or close the gap, sorry. And teams like Chelsea have already spent money. Man United are going to spend money. What do you think other clubs specifically have to do to close the gap and potentially challenge for the title?
This is another incredibly difficult question to answer, because it's impossible to know, because it was impossible to envisage Liverpool's rise. No, if you look back 2 years ago and you think, oh, Wijnaldum, Henderson in a midfield that's just won the league by 23 points, nobody would have believed you. When Wijnaldum was playing for Newcastle, nobody would have seen him become the player he is now.
No,
and
agreed.
It's in the Liverpool philosophy that Jurgen Klopp has established to create players rather than bringing them in. And I think that's what City, Chelsea, United all try and do, is that they'll try and bring in these world-class players to build their sides up. Yeah, I think Bruno Fernandes is a fantastic addition to United, and I think he'll lead them to at least an easy top 4 finish next season. But instead, I just feel like everybody can take a leaf out of Liverpool's book and sort of try and build a team rather than a collection of superstars.
Agreed. What about a team like Leicester? Because obviously they've been a bit of an interesting one this year. They started the season so well, they've gone on. A lot of people sort of expected them to drop off, but they haven't. Maybe that's through the form of Chelsea and Man United and other teams that should be around there, Arsenal, Tottenham. But they've stayed in the top 4. Since the lockdown's come back, they've struggled. Do you think they'll finish in the top 4 this season? And what do you think they'll do next season?
It really, really pains me to say that I don't think they're going to finish in the top 4. And then I think having more games than you would in the Champions League, playing Europa League football, they'll struggle next season, and I can see them finishing 7th or 8th next season.
I can agree with that. I think
Uh,
since the football's come back, I don't think they've been their old self. I like Brendan Rodgers as a manager. I think he's a great coach. Obviously, they've got players. They've got some brilliant players in the team, like Maddison, Tielemans. But this summer, if they don't get top four, I can see Maddison potentially leaving, because I think it's only a matter of time before he leaves anyway, to be honest. Um, Maybe the Man United door's closed for him now with Fernandes coming in, but I don't know. I think Chelsea and Man United have really impressed me since we've come back, and obviously Chelsea got a brilliant result against Man City the other day, and Man U keep getting results. So yeah, I think I'd agree with you. I think I can see them finishing 5th. So yeah, I think that's about all.
Everything, you?
Yeah, I think so. Right. Thank you very much for coming on for the first episode.
It's no problem, honestly.
Love to have you back one day as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, thanks everyone for listening. I'll see you later.